listening to the Adventure Party for the 4th week of March 2021. This week, the party put together a master-crafted episode made of the hottest of takes on crafting in RPGs. The Adventure Party, discussing tabletop, everyday gaming, the Irish way. Welcome to the party. I'm Shane.
And I'm Eoin.
And we are here today to craft a perfect episode of podcasting for you. It is the Crafting in RPGs episode, and how your little band of thieves and mad scientists have put together such wonderful, wonderful toys for themselves to play with, or not, depending on how terrible the crafting system in your RPG of choice is. So, general thoughts first, I suppose. Eoin?
These are generally bad. That's my first takeaway. These are generally bad. I've got a player who really loves crafting systems. Deeply, deeply loves the idea of making items, and he makes something cool. In an MMO, he's always all in on the crafting, all the crafting professions. He loves making stuff. He loves making people's gear better, giving them something permanent like that. He loves the power fantasy of it. So few RPGs are any use at all at it. It's really depressing.
I understand the appeal of the crafting system. I understand what some people consider essential and some people would ignore it. The thing about the crafting system for me is I think it's sort of a very separate motivation to what some might call a core of the RPG experience, which is finding things, because the game genre is founded on the idea of going into a weird dungeon to get like 50 copper pieces and a +2 spatula, and because it's so strongly rooted in that sort of discovery based mindset that your items are stuff you find, you quest for. Maybe you find them randomly, or maybe you hear rumors at the end and you go down a dungeon to get it specifically. But the point is that because the genre is based on that idea of discovery as the way of getting things, creation is, in response, very half-baked. And there, even 40 years on, there isn't a great concept in many games of, well, what do we do if our players want to be the ones making these +2 spatulas of doom?
And a lot of GMs have been burned on players using the crafting rules, making something broken.
Yeah. I guess, yeah, it really depends on like when you came in, because if you came into the hobby when D&D 3.5 was the tool, or D&D 3.0 or 3.5 had some expansive and robust and horrendously easy to break magic item creation rules, and that very often plagued 3.5 games. I remember there would be times when entire 3.5 campaigns would just grind to a halt, as someone would say, I have this bag of money, I would like the local artificer to please make us this customized magic item. It will only take us 15 days of sitting around the tavern drinking for us to get it. But if on day 14, orcs were to attack to make something interesting happen, why all of that would be wasted, and thus I would be very mad at my GM.
I think, like, technically, if you try to make a always-on True Strike item in 3.5, you can make it for about $8,000.
Yeah.
So, like, you technically can make it, but no GM would ever allow it. But technically you can make it, and that's your problem.
Yeah. Yeah, there was a whole bunch of stuff like that. It's just like something was you don't cost as a bonus, you cost as a spell casting or spell effect.
You could basically permanency a first level spell, and it's like, this is, instead of being on once, this is always on. And you break it that way because the game balance on some stuff works on the basis of, well, there's only so many times they can activate this. But if someone goes, hang on, what if I take this thing that is really powerful but I can only activate so often, and tie it to something where the activation cost is paid by something else, or it's done something differently, I could really make something really cool this way. And there's a discovery and combo aspect that's nice in an RPG, but the problem is it's often desperately unbalanced because someone comes up with an idea that deliberately doesn't work that way in other times and goes, let's circumvent this drawback. and you're left with a bit of a disaster to clean up.
Yeah, it is. It is its own kind of discovery. Is I have discovered how to snap this game over my knee by.
Yeah.
But it's possibly not quite the type of discovery that the game designers were hoping for.
A lot of modern crafting, like in the D&D sphere, like does Fifth Ed have any rules for crafting magic items?
I think it's like it takes a month. I think it's about the height of it. Fair enough. And like it has guidelines, which are like just very vague and mean. If it's in the same vague tier of magic item, it takes this amount of time and this many gold pieces. But it's not bespoke. It's very much, well, make something off the list. There's no customizing ability. There's no thing like you could do in 3.5 where you would start with a +1 sword, and as you leveled up, got access to more spells and higher bonuses. You would slowly build up one item over the course of your career. There's nothing like that.
Pathfinder 2nd Ed uses runes, so you can basically put a new rune on your weapon. So, oh, cool, my sword it's now +2 sword. I put a +2 rune on it, or I put a +3 striking rune on it, so it's like it's a +3 sword with extra dice damage. So they can do stuff like that, which is at least somewhat a mixture of customizability and a little bit of discovery. But it's not you can make anything. It's slow. You make stuff from this list, and the crafting is mostly you make money effectively. So you make checks, and that produces money. And when you reach the cost of the item, bing, your item is made. So it kind of saves you a little bit of money, but it takes tons of time. So it's not super powerful, really.
Yeah, it's one of those things where it makes sense if you can make items of any description and sell them for money. It sort of makes sense when you're between adventures, but that gets into the whole question of what is downtime for, and we've had episodes on that. So that, like, there's still this sort of baseline reluctance by a lot of parties to be idle at any point, and the concept of we take a month off to rest after the Tomb of Terribles doesn't occur to a lot of parties. So, they can see these kinds of crafting rules as sort of, well, what's the point of that? But then for the one player who really likes to be making things, that's all they want to do.
Players are bad at modeling character fatigue. No one's ever like, now to go home and flip through a book for 8 hours, not really reading it, just kind of sitting around, then get some sleep, and then sleep in the next morning. No one's like that. Everyone's like, I go back home, and I work for 8 hours in the lab, and then I sleep for mathematically exactly 8 hours are required to prepare my new spells, and up I get again, away I go, Another 8 hours in the reagent mines before I head off to adventure for the day. Everyone's military efficiency. I think we all find in real life it has rarely goes so smooth.
There's a few painted over the year-long pandemic, listeners. But yeah, I guess that also brings up the other points, is that the expectation of the process of crafting. Like you mentioned reagents, and that's I think that's one of the big places where a crafting system sort of loses its color, as it were. Because what you're expecting is, to make this flaming sword, I must have the tongue of a dragon and crafted with iron that has been forged, in the heart of an iron golem or something like that. But because the game designers neglected to give a bespoke set list of ingredients for everything in their treasure tables, there's no guidelines for that for the tired and struggling GM. And generally, if there's no guidelines in the book, that just means the most GMs either shrug and ignore the whole idea, or they kill themselves coming up with their own bespoke system, which isn't fun for anyone.
Yeah. I mean, that's the thing, isn't it? Any GM, will try and accommodate their players. Most GMs are very good about, some player says, I want to make a magic sword. I want to make a flaming magic sword. Your GM, your first instinct is to go, all right, okay, Jesus, are there any rules for this? No. I guess you're gonna need, a sword and magic fire. Who's it hot in here, or is it just me? The GM is immediately under the thumb in a very difficult way. And most of the time, the first time a GM makes a magic item or custom makes a magic item for a player, it's busted or it's useless. And it very rarely hits the sweet spot where it's kind of meant to be. Because you're being asked to do something very demanding, which is put a cost on something that maybe the game doesn't cost very well. Or maybe the game does. And you're going, well, can I just let someone have something that costs 5,000 gold pieces? Is that okay for me to just say, yeah, I can have that? Because someone wants to make something cool. Like, how hard is it making a magic sword? And the GM is immediately asking themselves all of these like very difficult questions. Like, Shane, if you wanted to make a new PC for yourself, what would you do nowadays?
I would go to PC Direct, pick the first option, and just tell them, yeah, give me whatever one has the best hard drive. I don't care. Whichever one will play the new Cyberpunk or something.
And some players would say, that's not my fantasy. I want to pick out the parts and assemble them myself. And you're like, okay, that's just high-tech Lego. I can give you that. And then some players might say, actually, I don't want to use your store-bought parts. I want to make my own PC from raw materials. And I want you to think about someone saying that the next time they say, I want to craft a magic sword. I want to make my own processor from sand. And you'd be like,
yeah,
such a thing cannot be done, sir.
Yeah, but yeah, it's not clear where to abstract. Like,
yeah, very difficult.
Yeah, because like very rarely, even in a game with a video game with a good crafting system, is the act of hitting the button and time to the hammer strokes the cool part of the crafting.
It's usually collecting the stuff. That's often the fun bit. Getting the bits from the animals. And I'm going to give you an example of a crafting system now which actually utilizes that information. The Witcher RPG's crafting system from the Witcher RPG produced by Ortal Sorian under license from CD Projekt Red. That uses all the reagents from the game. And it goes, here's all the list of reagents. You want to make some stuff? Just pick out your list. That's the type of reagents, and you can get these from the following bits. So you need this ichor, you can get that from necker blood, or you can get it from these spleens or this other stuff, and that's where you get it from. And you want to make stuff, that's how you make stuff. And I think that's at least interesting, because you're taking advantage of the fact that somebody has already organised and thought about all that stuff in their game design, and you're just copying it over for your RPG.
But it's a lot easier to do that in a situation where someone has already done all the work out for you as part of the video game design.
Absolutely. But Shane, I'm giving a company that employs a professional game designer €60. I expect a little bit of that money to go on some fresh ideas about how to handle this problem.
That's fair.
And if it's not in the core book, if I like the game, I'm prepared to splash out another 40 on a book that talks about how to do this. I have the Spondulix. I can splash out. You know, I'm putting my money down. I can't think of this stuff myself. Wouldn't it be lovely if someone who was paid to do this did it for me, and I then give them cash in exchange?
Yeah, that's fair.
I'm not. I'm just saying. I don't think this is a lunatic person's position.
That's entirely fair. I'm just trying to think of, did I ever see this being done for D&D? And I think I saw it in some Dragon magazines, is that they listed out, well, this monster, monster manual monster, if you take this bit, it can take half the cost of making this magic item.
In the Draconomicon, there was a dragon crafting feat, which if you took, let you use dragon parts to make weapons, and they counted as basically a bunch of the cost. And they also made the weapon better in a couple of different ways, or the piece of armor better. I took it once in a Dragonlance campaign and didn't fight a single real dragon in it. Everything was an illusion, or an elemental that looked like a dragon, or in one memorable case, after I killed the dragon, tossed itself off a mountain to avoid me looting its body. And after a couple of Nah, let's be clear, Owen. 32 sessions, I said, this feat that I have taken that I've never been allowed to use, despite this campaign being called Dragonlance and involving fighting a lot of dragons, can I swap it out for something that does anything else? I'll take dodge at this stage. And I was allowed to swap it out. I was very frustrated. I was like, I want to make a bow. I have a dragon spine. It's going to be cool. And no. Did not happen.
I guess it's harder to do it in D&D because D&D sort of likes its one of the greater things back and forth of D&D is the sort of mismatch between how it wants to be iconic and have, all the trolls and drow and displaced beasts and beholders and such, but also it wants to be a constant cycle of new monsters, new content. And if you did have a setup where, this number of magic items needed this number of dragon spleens or elemental ashes, and then every time you make new monsters or new magic items, you'd have to sort of expand that list again. And I can see why, in that kind of content cycle that the obvious quote unquote version of reagents might not. You could also do something more mechanical where you say, well, this is a fire type creature, so it counts as it's 10 hit dice fire type creature, so it can count as 5 fire essence or something. But people, I feel, would feel that very mechanical and numbersy.
It is, but that's the kind of thing that a games company can spend the resources to do, and then everyone else can use that, and they'll find ways to get creative with it. If you're going to do something where it's very mechanicsy and very numbersy, that's really on the company to do. And I mean, how many times if you go into a Discord or a message board or a Facebook page for a particular game, will you see people asking about crafting systems? Because players have expressed an interest in making a piece of custom gear. They want to make a piece of custom gear, and I want to make this. This gun, I want to put a second barrel on my gun. And that's not a crazy request, Someone is like, I want this gun to shoot two times instead of once before I need to reload it. And you're like, that is not a ridiculous request. How do I do that? And given the GM support in that way is important, and game designers can help out with that one. And they don't want to do it because it's a lot of work. And it's a lot of numbers crunching, and it's probably not a lot of fun to write. But it's got some potential in terms of, hey, I want to do this thing, and it will make certain things better.
Yeah, I think that one of the issues, though, is that it's a lot of work, but it's also a lot of work for generally one or two people at a given table. And you have a situation where you have, well, you could argue that that's always been in some RPGs, like you have, half the book is magic spells, even though spellcasters or scions or whatever are supposed to be super rare in the setting. But, this is a group of adventurers, so there's obviously going to be 3 of them. But yeah, it's sort of the mismatch of resources. It's like how much effort can you put in versus gameplay you get out.
I have never seen anyone say, oh, the magic book has crafting rules? Ugh, that sucks. I've seen people say the magic book has crafting rules and they suck. And I've seen people say there's no crafting rules, that's annoying. But I've never seen anyone say, oh, rules for crafting magic items, wasted in my opinion. Wasted space. I'm sure there are people who hold that opinion, but it's not a very common opinion. It's sometimes like these rules take too long to use, or these rules are terrible. That happens, but I very rarely see someone going, ugh. Who uses rules for making your own stuff? Who'd be interested in that? Another one that's got quite a good system that worth taking a look at, which takes a more narrative route, was something that the invention subsystem, which was used for Fate, specifically as part of the Atomic Robo RPG. You can go check it out on the Fate SRD if you so choose. And it's got this whole idea where you have 3 basic parts of an invention: its function, a flaw, and 1 or more stunts or extras that it can do. And then you have to determine its function, what it does in the story, define its capabilities, how it fulfills that role, put it together, make a skill roll, pay for it, and then determine its flaw. So it's meant to have something that goes wrong, and then the GMs and the players have a little roll-off contest. And if the players win, they pick the flaw, and if the GM wins, the GM picks the flaw. So it's a way to basically kind of balance. I'm making this thing, and the GM goes, okay, well, up to you what it gets. And they're like, well, it's going to weigh a ton. And he's like, okay, your character's super strong though. And goes, yeah, but it does weigh a ton. If someone else wants to pick it up and carry it around, it's super heavy. Whereas if the GM wins, he might go, oh, well, go with massive power requirements. It needs to be plugged into a generator before it can fire. And that's a way to do that. So it's a kind of a more narrative approach, which is good and generic and can be pretty much applied to everything. And there's an element of give and take there, and both players can use stuff. And if someone's looking to generalize making an item, that is not a bad framework to start with.
Yeah. I think that's the thing is like you do generally want your items to feel unique, and part of the way to do that would be to add some narrative flair to them.
Absolutely. I'll give you another example, which is Exalted. Because it's about these kind of celestial god kings returning to take their place in creation. And part of it was the amazing technology that only they could create and only they could maintain. And it's fallen into disuse, so they can make it again. And that's one of the big archetypes for that, is being the crafter character who can make this magnificent things, these flying god engines that will wheel their way through the sky,
The Twilight Cast, I believe. Is it the Twilight Cast, or is that those?
Twilight were the magic makers, but also they would create stuff. That was one of their bags. But any of them, you could be a Dawn and make stuff as well. Like everyone had just Twilight's always had it as an option. Anyone else could pick it as an option. But a big part of their one was they had these whole huge crafting trees, and they had charms that made them better at crafting. And in second ed, they had this whole thing with there's a charm there called the Worksman Needs No Tools, or the Craftsman Needs No Tools. And this whole thing is I just use this charm and I work with my bare hands.
Yeah, you turn into the guy from Minecraft and you just punch a rock and get coal out and such.
I just punch the rock until I get steel falls out of it. And then I punch the steel until it's a sword. And then there's my sword, And there's funky stuff with that. It reached its apotheosis in third ed, Exalted, where there were several hundred charms in the core book, and about half of them were crafting charms. It was insane. And so many of them were dice fixers and little minor modifiers and ways to adjust your odds that it was crazy. And the funniest part of it was that because you're going, okay, I want to make this object, how much downtime does it take? And one of their solutions for downtime was to say, right, you can make low-level items whenever you want. And when you do that, you generate something called Bronze XP. Now, Bronze XP is crafting XP, which you can use to basically purchase stuff. You can also use Bronze XP to make items that give Silver XP.
Oh no.
Then, when you make items that make Silver XP, get Gold XP, which can be used to produce the highest tier of thing. So, my example of that was that you had a craftsman who was going, the Dawn goes to the Twilight and says, I want you to finish that sky fortress so we can bring our army to the north and lay siege to the Dreadlord's castle. And the Twilight goes, all right, no problem. I'll get to work on that. And the Twilight hits the books and goes, I'm short some gold XP. Better go craft something to get some. Oh, wait, I'm short silver. Uh-oh. And then the Dawn comes back into the room, and the Twilight is winching down a slab of artisanal celestial bread onto a sheaf of freshly carved Tarask meat with some still living Demon Sultan leaves on top of another slice of celestial bread. And the Dawn goes, where the hell's my Sky Citadel? Why aren't you working on it? Cliff goes, what does it think I'm doing? You know?
I think there's a Bryan Cranston clip for this, but anyway.
There's a Malcolm in the Middle clip about that, basically. But yeah, it's legitimately like an effort was made to make it a big involved thing, and fair play to them, they just went off the deep end, which is another thing that can happen. But a fair play to them trying. In Deadlands Hell on Earth, the crafting system did involve square roots, which is something you wouldn't see much in a modern narrative. People going, oh yeah, yep, square root, find the square root of the whole thing. And people get annoyed when you ask them to add things. They get very annoyed when you ask them to multiply. Asking people to find a square root, it's like, you've got a calculator in your pocket, guys. Come on.
Yeah, I guess that sort of comes back to the other point, is that if you are making your crafting system, you want something that has just enough time and game time and out of table time that it's interesting and engaging to the person who is invested in this crafting project, but that it doesn't, leave the rest of the players, checking their phones or, stabbing NPCs to make something else happen. So you may want to make sure that your crafting system has the correct time footprint, as it were, that it's getting the right balance there as well.
Yeah, it shouldn't eat up table time. Ideally, it should be resolved quickly or
between sessions.
Something to be done between sessions. That is the spot for it.
Yeah, but then you another episode we had on people who like the game to stop existing between sessions, but that's a different episode. But yeah, it's just a tricky subject, and it's very difficult to find something that's going to satisfy everyone. But it is really something I think more RPGs should consider. And yeah,
it's a common power fantasy. That's the thing. That's what some people want to be able to do. And you can't just go, well, those people are clearly stupid to think that. It's like, you can't think that way.
Particularly if you're dealing with 80s children who need their A-Team or their MacGyver.
You can't tell people, no, that's the wrong kind of fun to have. If somebody wants to do that, well, the GM should try to facilitate that. If it's too complicated for the GM to facilitate that, that's on to the designers. Get on it, get a couple of really good ideas for crafting systems, and then you'll do well, and bigger games will steal them from you, and that's how you know you were doing something right.
Yeah, that's true. And also, you don't have to completely abandon the traditional, recovery system. Like, you could mix and match. Maybe instead of having 2+3 swords in the dungeon, you have 1+3 sword, and maybe like the ancient instructions from the techno wizards of yore on how to make a +3 exploding crossbow or something. Turn bits of crafting into treasure, and you think maybe instead of 1,000 gold pieces of coins, just 1,000 gold pieces of Tarrasque guts or something. Something that they can make. And if they're not interested in crafting, you can always just say, well, the local Wizards Guild will take that for 70%. You'll still get something out of it, even if you don't use it yourselves.
Yeah, absolutely.
Well, folks, I think we might have constructed a decent episode on it. We will be grinding up our charms and perhaps adding some filigree to this, and scrawling our names in the back to let us know that this is our masterpiece. Any finishing touches, High Artificer Eoin?
Not particularly. Read a bunch of different systems. You might get some good ideas for your one, especially if you get asked a question. Either a story-focused approach or a heavy mechanics approach. Both of them have virtues and might spark some ideas if you're in a situation where you have to create something. Well,
we must go on and start work on our next fine masterpiece. But if you have any components that you've found cut out of the corpse of one of your adventurers, and would like us to, create a new masterwork out of those, you can hit us up on our social media. But for now, this party's over. Thanks for listening to Adventure Time. You can find show notes and links to things we've mentioned at www.theadventuringparty.net and on our Facebook page. You can leave comments there, or talk to our Twitter account at AdventurePTY, or you can record a voice message at www.speakpipe.com/theadventuringparty. We can also be contacted directly by email at party@theadventuringparty.net. If you'd like to be in touch with the party all the time, come join our Discord server, link in the show notes. The Adventuring Party is released under a Creative Commons Attribution Non-Commercial Share Alike version 3 license.